My name is David Chen, and for 8 years I managed security operations at Metropolitan Medical Center's morgue facility. The position required monitoring surveillance systems, maintaining access controls, and ensuring proper documentation of all after-hours activities in areas containing deceased individuals and sensitive medical equipment. Our security system consisted of 12 high-definition cameras positioned throughout the morgue, storage areas, preparation rooms, corridors, and entrances. The cameras recorded continuously, with digital files stored on secure servers and archived according to hospital policy, requiring 6-month retention for legal and administrative purposes. Standard security footage was routine and predictable. Staff conducting legitimate duties, delivery personnel bringing supplies or removing bodies, and maintenance workers performing scheduled equipment service. Occasionally, we'd capture minor incidents like animals that had wandered into the facility or visitors who had become lost and accidentally accessed restricted areas. The system operated reliably throughout my tenure, providing comprehensive documentation of morgue activities without significant technical problems or security breaches. Professional installation, regular maintenance, and quality equipment that met hospital standards for medical facility surveillance. But on May 8, 2021, while reviewing overnight footage from the previous evening, I discovered recording content that challenged my understanding of both security documentation and the temporal limitations of surveillance technology. Camera 7, positioned to monitor the main corridor connecting storage areas to preparation rooms, had captured approximately 40 minutes of activity that didn't correspond to any scheduled operations or authorized personnel access. The footage showed 2 orderlies, dressed in standard hospital uniforms, transporting bodies on gurneys through the corridor. The orderlies appeared professional and competent, following proper protocols for body movement and maintaining appropriate respect for deceased individuals. But I had no record of any body transfers scheduled for the time period shown in the footage. No deliveries, no pickups, no internal movement between storage and preparation areas. The morgue should have been empty except for bodies in long-term storage awaiting family arrangements. I checked staffing records for the evening of May 7th. No orderlies scheduled for overnight duty. No authorized personnel with access to the morgue during the time frame captured in the security footage. More puzzling was the timestamp displayed on the footage. May 7th, 2031, 10 years in the future from the actual recording date. I assumed this was a technical malfunction with the camera's internal clock, possibly caused by power fluctuations or software updates that had reset the date-time settings incorrectly. I contacted our IT department, requesting technical evaluation of Camera 7 and explanation for the impossible timestamp and unauthorized activity footage. Mr. Chen, this camera is functioning normally, the technician reported after comprehensive testing. Internal clock is accurate, no recent configuration changes, no indication of malfunction or tampering. But the footage clearly showed activity that hadn't been authorized and bore timestamps that were impossible according to normal temporal limitations. I reviewed the footage frame by frame, looking for any indication of digital manipulation or editing that might explain the mysterious content. The orderlies in the footage were unfamiliar to me, not current hospital employees, not staff members I recognized from previous employment, not individuals who should have had access to morgue facilities. But their behavior was completely professional, proper body handling techniques, appropriate safety protocols, and respectful treatment of deceased individuals. They appeared to be legitimate hospital personnel conducting routine duties. I attempted to delete the mysterious footage, treating it as a technical anomaly that was cluttering our security archives with non-relevant content. But every attempt to erase the file failed. The footage would disappear from the server directory, then reappear within 24 hours, always with the same impossible timestamp and unauthorized activity content. I consulted with our security contractor about possible server malfunctions or software problems that might prevent normal file deletion procedures. Mr. Chen, we're not seeing any technical issues with your storage system, the contractor reported. Files should delete normally when authorized users remove them from the archive, but the footage persisted, automatically restoring itself despite multiple deletion attempts using different administrative credentials and technical approaches. In June, I discovered additional footage from the same future timestamp. More orderlies, more body transfers, and activities that suggested ongoing morgue operations 10 years beyond the current date. The future footage showed our facility in apparently normal operation, bodies being processed, standard procedures being followed, and staff conducting routine duties. But the individuals in the footage were unfamiliar, and the timestamp consistently showed dates in 2031. I began documenting the phenomenon, creating detailed logs of the persistent footage and my unsuccessful attempts to remove it from our security archives. Camera 7, May 7, 2031 footage. 2 orderlies, approximately 45 minutes body transport activity. No corresponding authorized personnel access for actual May 7, 2021. Deletion attempts, May 10, 12, 15, 18, 22. File auto-restores within 24 hours of removal. Additional footage appearing. June 3, 8, 14, same future timestamp pattern, different personnel, ongoing morgue operations. By July, our security server contained over 6 hours of footage from various dates in 2031, all showing morgue operations conducted by unfamiliar staff members processing bodies that hadn't yet arrived at our facility. The future footage was remarkably detailed and consistent with normal morgue operations. Proper procedures, appropriate equipment usage, and professional behavior that suggested legitimate hospital activities. But the individuals in the footage didn't exist in our current employment database, and the bodies they were processing weren't present in our current inventory. On August 15th, I made a disturbing discovery while reviewing recent footage. One of the orderlies from the 2031 recordings looked familiar. Similar build, facial features and mannerisms to my own appearance. But approximately 10 years older, the footage appeared to show my future self, conducting security duties in the same morgue where I currently worked, but aged and wearing slightly different uniform styles that might reflect hospital policy changes over the coming decade. I realized that the security system was somehow documenting future operations, showing morgue activities that would occur 10 years beyond the current date and involving staff, members who would be employed at our facility. During that future period, the footage suggested continuity of operations, ongoing morgue functions, and my own continued employment and security management throughout the coming decade. But it also raised questions about the temporal limitations of surveillance technology and the possibility that security systems could document events before they occurred in normal chronological sequence. I submitted my final security report in September 2021, noting the persistent future footage and recommending that incoming security management monitor the phenomenon for potential operational insights. Some surveillance systems, I learned, operate according to principles that transcend normal documentation limitations, recording not just current activities but future operations that provide reassurance about institutional continuity and employment stability. My name is Dr. Patricia Holloway, and for 16 years I served as Chief Forensic Pathologist at the County Medical Examiner's Office. The position required conducting comprehensive post-mortem examinations, documenting findings in detailed autopsy reports, and determining cause and manner of death for cases requiring legal investigation. Autopsy reports followed strict formatting requirements, external examination findings, internal organ assessment, tissue sampling procedures, toxicology requests, and final conclusions based on pathological evidence. Each report required my signature and professional seal, certifying that the documented findings reflected my direct examination and expert medical opinion. Report preparation was always completed after examination procedures. I would conduct the autopsy, document observations on preliminary worksheets, then dictate comprehensive findings that would be transcribed into official reports for legal proceedings and family notification. This sequence was fundamental to forensic pathology. Examination first, documentation second, conclusions based on evidence observed during post-mortem procedures. But on September 22, 2020, I encountered a case that challenged this basic principle of medical investigation and forced me to reconsider the temporal relationship between examination and documentation. The case was referred by the police department. Maria Santos, a 34-year-old woman found deceased in her apartment under circumstances requiring forensic determination of cause and manner of death. Standard referral that would require comprehensive autopsy examination and detailed reporting. The body arrived at our facility at 11:45 p.m., accompanied by police reports, scene photographs, and preliminary medical information from responding paramedics. I scheduled the autopsy for early morning, allowing time for proper preparation and coordination with toxicology services. At midnight, I reviewed the case file to familiarize myself with the circumstances and prepare appropriate examination protocols. Police reports indicated no obvious trauma, no signs of struggle, and no apparent suicide notes or evidence of intentional self-harm. But when I opened the case file, I found something that stopped me cold: a completed autopsy report, properly formatted and signed with my name and professional seal. The report was dated September 22nd, 2020, the current date, and bore my signature authenticating findings that I hadn't yet observed through post-mortem examination. I read the report carefully. It described comprehensive autopsy procedures, external examination, internal organ dissection, tissue sampling, and photographic documentation. The writing style was consistent with my standard reporting format, using medical terminology and organizational structure that reflected my professional practices, but I hadn't conducted any examination yet. Maria Santos's body was still in cold storage, awaiting the morning autopsy that I had scheduled. The report documented specific findings: no external trauma, normal organ appearance except for cardiac abnormalities, evidence of prescription medication usage, and blood chemistry suggesting possible drug interaction. Most disturbing was the conclusion: cause of death to be determined pending additional investigation. The report documented examination, procedures I hadn't performed to reach conclusions I hadn't drawn about a case I hadn't yet investigated. I assumed the report was an administrative error, perhaps template documentation that had been accidentally completed with Maria Santos's case information, or previous autopsy findings that had been misfiled with the wrong case number. I contacted our administrative staff, requesting clarification about the erroneous autopsy report and verification of proper case file management. Dr. Holloway, that report was completed and filed this evening, the night clerk confirmed. Received from your office at 10:30 p.m. with your electronic signature authentication. But I had been at home until 11:30 p.m., hadn't accessed any case files, and hadn't conducted any examination procedures that would generate autopsy documentation. I checked the report's electronic signature data. The authentication showed my login credentials, my computer terminal, and timestamp indicating document completion during hours when I was definitely not at the office. At 8 a.m., I began Maria Santos's autopsy examination, following standard forensic protocols while comparing my observations to the findings documented in the mysterious pre-completed report. Every detail matched perfectly. External examination revealed no trauma, exactly as described in the advance report. Internal organ examination showed normal appearance except for cardiac abnormalities that matched the advanced documentation precisely. I discovered prescription medications in tissue samples, found evidence of drug interactions, and observed pathological changes that corresponded exactly to the findings listed in the report I had found before conducting any examination. 2. Advance report had documented my autopsy findings with perfect accuracy, describing procedures I would perform and observations I would make during an examination that hadn't yet occurred when the report was created, but the cause of death remained to be determined exactly as stated in the advance documentation. I spent additional hours investigating Maria Santos's case, consulting with toxicologists, reviewing medical history, and conducting supplementary tests that might clarify the circumstances of her death. But despite comprehensive investigation, I couldn't establish a definitive cause of death. The evidence suggested natural causes, but specific mechanisms remained unclear despite thorough pathological examination. My final report maintained the same conclusion that had appeared in the mysterious advance documentation. Cause of death to be determined pending additional investigation. Over the following months, I encountered additional cases where completed autopsy reports appeared before I conducted the corresponding examinations. Each report documented findings with perfect accuracy, described procedures I would later perform, and reached conclusions that matched my professional assessment after completing thorough investigation. But every advance report concluded with "to be determined," regardless of how comprehensive the examination procedures or how clear the pathological evidence appeared, I realized that some aspect of my professional responsibilities was operating beyond normal temporal constraints, creating documentation that transcended the usual sequence of examination followed by reporting. The advance reports were always helpful. They prepared me for unusual findings, suggested additional tests that improved diagnostic accuracy, and ensured comprehensive examination of cases that might otherwise receive routine processing, but they also suggested that forensic conclusions required something more than technical examination and medical expertise, perhaps a different kind of investigation that operated according to principles beyond normal pathological determination. The advance reports continued throughout my tenure at the medical examiner's office, providing preview documentation that enhanced the quality of my forensic work while maintaining appropriate uncertainty about matters that required deeper investigation than post-mortem examination could provide. Some cause of death determinations, I learned, transcend normal forensic pathology, requiring investigation methods that operate independently of standard examination procedures and documentation that acknowledges the limitations of medical science in understanding the full circumstances of human mortality. My name is Dr. Michael Rodriguez, and for 14 years I conducted forensic autopsies at the State Medical Examiner's facility. The work required technical precision, attention to detail, and the ability to maintain professional objectivity while examining deceased individuals under circumstances that often involved trauma, violence, or unexplained death. Our primary autopsy suite contained a stainless steel examination table, manufactured by Kugel Medical Equipment in 1987. The table was built to institutional standards: chemical-resistant surface, integrated drainage system, and adjustable features that supported various examination procedures. Heavy, reliable equipment that had served the facility for over 3 decades. The table showed normal signs of long-term use: microscopic scratches from surgical instruments, minor staining from chemical exposure, and slight wear patterns around drainage areas where thousands of examinations had been conducted. Nothing unusual for equipment that had been used continuously for forensic procedures since the facility's opening. But in March 2020, while conducting routine maintenance on the drainage system, I noticed something that hadn't been apparent during normal use: extensive scratching on the underside of the table, concentrated around the main drainage port. The scratches appeared deliberate rather than accidental, organized patterns that suggested systematic marking rather than random damage from equipment contact or normal wear. Too regular to be coincidental, too purposeful to result from mechanical causes. I examined the markings more carefully. They consisted of small groups of parallel lines, arranged in clusters that resembled tally marks or counting systems, as if someone had been systematically documenting something by scratching marks on the hidden underside of the autopsy table. I counted over 400 individual marks, organized into groups of 5 with diagonal lines crossing each group in the traditional tally system. Someone had been maintaining a careful count of something over an extended period, using the concealed area beneath the table as a recording surface. But morgue staff had no reason to mark the underside of equipment, and maintenance procedures didn't involve any activities that would create systematic scratching patterns. I consulted with facility maintenance, requesting information about possible explanations for the extensive markings beneath the autopsy table. Dr. Rodriguez, those scratches weren't there during our last scheduled service, the technician reported after examining the table. This looks like recent activity created within the past few months. But no one admitted knowledge of the markings, and no maintenance activities could account for the systematic scratch patterns. I documented the discovery and continued using the table for routine autopsy procedures, paying closer attention to any sounds or phenomena that might explain the mysterious tallying activity. On April 15th, while conducting the autopsy of James Patterson, a 67-year-old man who had died from apparent natural causes, I heard something that made me pause: faint whispering sounds coming from the direction of the table's drainage system. The whispers were barely audible, easily dismissed as ventilation system noise or sounds from adjacent rooms. But they seemed rhythmic, organized, like quiet conversation or systematic counting. I stopped my examination and listened carefully. The whispering continued, soft, persistent, apparently coming from beneath the table where the drainage system connected to the facility's main plumbing. I couldn't make out specific words, but the sounds had the cadence and structure of human speech rather than mechanical noise or environmental sounds. I resumed Patterson's autopsy, but the whispering continued throughout the procedure, always present when I was actively working, always seeming to come from the area beneath the examination table. During subsequent autopsies, I began paying closer attention to the whispered sounds. They occurred consistently during examination procedures, seemed to respond to my activities, and occasionally became clear enough to suggest actual words rather than indistinct murmuring. On May 3rd, while examining Margaret Chen, a 54-year-old woman who had died in a traffic accident, I heard something that made my hands shake. The whispering voice clearly spoke Chen's name. Margaret Chen, 54 years old. Traffic accident. The voice was speaking patient information that I hadn't yet read aloud from the case file. I had been conducting external examination, but hadn't reviewed the preliminary documentation or spoken any identifying information about the deceased. I checked the case file. The whispered information was accurate. Margaret Chen, age 54, died in traffic accident as stated by the voice beneath the table. "Who's there?" I called out. "Is someone in the drainage system?" The whispering stopped immediately. I waited several minutes, but no further sounds emerged from beneath the table. I contacted facility security, requesting inspection of the plumbing and drainage systems for possible unauthorized access or hidden speakers that might explain the mysterious voice activity. "Dr. Rodriguez, we've checked the entire drainage system," the security chief reported. "No access points large enough for human entry, no electronic equipment, no explanation for voice transmission through the plumbing." But the whispered commentary continued during subsequent autopsies, always providing accurate information about patients before I reviewed their case files, always speaking from the area beneath the examination table, always ceasing when I attempted direct communication. Robert Williams, 73 years old, cardiac arrest. Sarah Davis, 45 years old, drug overdose. Michael Thompson, 61 years old, industrial accident. Each whispered identification proved accurate when compared to official case documentation. I began conducting autopsies with a digital recorder positioned near the table's drainage area, hoping to capture evidence of the mysterious voice commentary. But audio playback revealed only my own activities. Examination procedures, dictated observations, and normal sounds associated with forensic investigation. No whispered voices, no patient identification commentary, no evidence of the sounds I heard clearly during every autopsy. The voices were somehow audible only to me during active examination procedures, and only while I was working directly above the area where the systematic tally marks had been scratched. On June 20th, I heard the most disturbing whispered commentary yet. Rodriguez, Michael, 52 years old, cause to be determined. The voice was describing me using the same format it employed for deceased patients: name, age, and status, suggesting that I was the subject of post-mortem examination rather than the pathologist conducting the investigation. I checked the tally marks beneath the table again. The count had increased to over 500 individual scratches, suggesting ongoing documentation of something that required systematic tallying. I realized that the voice was maintaining records of all individuals who had been examined on the table, including living people like myself who worked above. The concealed marking system, the whispered commentary, was documenting not just deceased patients, but everyone who came into contact with the examination table, creating comprehensive records that transcended the normal boundaries between the living and the dead. I requested transfer to a different examination suite, citing equipment concerns that made continued use of the primary table inadvisable. But sometimes, late at night when the facility is quiet, I still hear faint whispering from the direction of the old examination table. The voice continues its systematic documentation, maintaining records that include everyone who has ever been part of the forensic examination process. Some record-keeping systems, I learned, operate according to principles that transcend normal documentation boundaries, maintaining comprehensive tallies that include not just the subjects of investigation, but everyone involved in the investigative process itself. My name is Carol Henderson, and for 9 years I worked as administrative coordinator for the County Medical Examiner's Office. My responsibilities included processing death certificates, maintaining official records, and ensuring proper documentation for all cases requiring forensic investigation or natural death certification. Death certificate preparation followed strict regulatory protocols. Each document required specific information: decedent's personal details, circumstances of death, medical findings, and official determination of cause and manner of death. The certificates were typed on official forms, signed by the examining physician, and filed with state vital records within 72 hours of completion. Our office processed approximately 200 death certificates monthly, each requiring careful attention to accuracy and completeness. Errors in official death documentation could create legal complications, insurance problems, and administrative difficulties for grieving families. The system worked efficiently throughout my tenure. Physicians completed examination procedures, dictated findings for transcription, and signed official certificates that were processed through standard administrative channels. But on July 18, 2020, I encountered a case that challenged this fundamental aspect of death documentation and raised questions about the temporal limitations of official record keeping. The case involved Harold Morrison, a 71-year-old man who had died from apparent heart failure at Metropolitan General Hospital. Dr. Williams had conducted post-mortem examination and dictated standard findings for death certificate preparation. I transcribed Dr. Williams' dictation into the official certificate format. Harold Morrison, age 71, died July 17, 2020, from myocardial infarction. Standard documentation that would be signed and filed according to established procedures. But when I prepared the certificate for Dr. Williams' signature, I found something in the case file that confused me. A second death certificate for Harold Morrison, handwritten rather than typed, bearing different information and an impossible date. The handwritten certificate listed the same decedent but showed different details. Harold Morrison, age 71, died July 22, 2020, from complications following surgical procedure. The handwritten certificate was dated 5 days in the future from Morrison's actual death date and described a different cause of death than the medical findings Dr. Williams had documented. But both certificates bore Dr. Williams' signature, identical handwriting, identical professional seal, identical authentication that certified the accuracy of contradictory information. I approached Dr. Williams about the duplicate certificate, assuming one version contained clerical errors that needed correction before official filing. Dr. Williams, I have 2 death certificates for Harold Morrison with different information. Which version should I process? Dr. Williams examined both documents carefully. Carol, I only prepared 1 certificate for Morrison. The typed version with heart failure as cause of death. I have no memory of creating this handwritten certificate, but the handwritten certificate clearly bore his signature and professional seal, apparently completed with the same pen and attention to detail that characterized his normal documentation practices. The handwriting looks like mine, Dr. Williams admitted. But the information is incorrect. Morrison died on July 17th from heart failure, not July 22nd from surgical complications. And I didn't write this certificate. I checked the case file for any additional documentation that might explain the duplicate certificate, found standard autopsy notes, hospital records, and preliminary reports, all consistent with the typed certificate showing death from myocardial infarction on July 17th. But the handwritten certificate persisted, showing impossible information authenticated by Dr. Williams's signature despite his lack of memory regarding its creation. Filed the typed certificate according to standard procedures and stored the handwritten version in a separate folder for unusual administrative issues requiring supervisory review. But on July 2nd, the date listed on the mysterious handwritten certificate, I received disturbing news from Metropolitan General Hospital. Harold Morrison's family had requested his body be returned to the hospital for additional medical procedures. Despite being deceased for 5 days, Morrison was scheduled for emergency surgery due to complications that had developed post-mortem. Ms. Henderson, this is highly unusual, the hospital administrator explained. But Morrison's family has obtained court orders requiring surgical intervention for post-mortem complications that threaten other family members. The surgical procedure was conducted on July 22nd, exactly as predicted by the handwritten death certificate that had appeared 5 days before the scheduled surgery. During the procedure, Morrison's condition deteriorated, and he was officially pronounced dead from complications following surgical procedure, exactly as documented in the mysterious handwritten certificate. I realized that the duplicate certificate had somehow predicted future events, documenting Morrison's second death before the circumstances that would cause it had occurred. Over the following months, I encountered additional cases where handwritten death certificates appeared alongside standard typed versions, always showing future dates and alternative causes of death that later proved accurate. Patient Chen. Typed certificate showed natural death on March 15th. Handwritten certificate showed accidental death on March 20th. Chen's body was damaged in transport accident on March 20th, requiring amended death certificate. Patient Davis. Typed certificate showed heart failure on June 8th. Handwritten certificate showed drug overdose on June 12th. Post-mortem toxicology results received June 12th revealed previously undetected drug levels. Each handwritten certificate predicted revisions, amendments, or additional circumstances that would affect the accuracy of original death documentation. Began treating the handwritten certificates as advance warnings about cases that would require additional investigation or amended documentation. The predictions helped me prepare appropriate paperwork and anticipate administrative complications before they occurred, but I never understood how Dr. Williams could create accurate predictions without conscious awareness, or why his signature appeared on documentation he couldn't remember completing. On December 15th, 2020, I found a handwritten death certificate that stopped me cold. Henderson. Carol, age 44, died December 20th, 2020, from complications following administrative duties. My own death certificate, handwritten in Dr. Williams' familiar script, predicting my death within 5 days and suggesting that my administrative work would somehow cause fatal complications. I took immediate medical leave, citing health concerns that made continued work inadvisable until after the predicted death date had passed safely. But I kept the handwritten certificate as evidence of a documentation system that operated beyond normal temporal constraints, creating official records that transcended the usual limitations of administrative processing and regulatory compliance. Some death certificates, I learned, document not just completed deaths but potential deaths that require advanced preparation, ensuring that appropriate paperwork exists for all possible outcomes, regardless of when they occur in normal chronological sequence.